Muse was to be Manaski's final solo script for Star Trek, at least as far as anyone knew at the time. Oh sure, he was helping Braga with his end-of-season, ill-advised Borg story Unimatrix Zero, but this was his own personal finale. And keeping that in mind, Muse is a completely understandable outing for someone as prepared to push the envelope as Manaski was. Manaski fell on his face more than once. The fact that the best thing in Mask is Picard making a dick joke makes that all too clear. But that was only because of his willingness to take chances that other people wouldn't. I mean, I still think that The Thaw is a great episode, despite the fact that many actual fans of Voyager hate it. I'm reminded of something Mark Rosewater said regarding the Wizards of the Coast game Magic the Gathering. They would poll on how much people would like individual cards, and if they found a card that was consistently rated a 7, something that people liked, and something that was rated half at 1s and 2s and half at 9s and 10s, they felt the second was the better choice. Quote, "If everyone likes your game, but no one loves it, it will fail." This sums up the difference between Manaski and many of his peers. Others would do a safe thing that people will probably like. Manaski will put out something crazy that people will either love or hate. So let's take a look.
Captain's log, stardate 53896. Ilana Torres has requested permission to take the Delta Flyer and search for dilithium.
Sounds like a church service. Now let us pray for protection from our captain's wrath. As they continue, we hear of the fate of Harry and Torres as perceived through a Greek play. It involves a shuttle crash because this is a play about Voyager. What else could it possibly be about? The patron, who also we can infer rules this land, gives the play a standing ovation. But he wants to hear more and demands a new Voyager play be ready in 1 week, much to Kellis the poet's chagrin. His girlfriend wants to celebrate their success, and the implication is she wants to rub their forehead vaginas together, but with the deadline, he's got to put that off to seek some inspiration for the next play. So he heads to the wreck of the Delta Flyer, where Torres is tied up and unconscious. She wakes up in a bit of a snit, understandably so, especially because he's obviously been slicing up her arm. He says he won't untie her, despite being her servant, which makes him a pretty shitty servant, I'd say.
Fly from me, the way inspiration always does.
The arts are important. I'm just not sure it justifies the kidnapping. I mean, I'm fairly certain that James Joyce never carried around duct tape in a chloroform-soaked rag. The cutting is not part of the performance art, though, thankfully. Although the answer is almost as bad. That's Kellis's idea of first aid. She had a fever, see, so he was releasing the heat by cutting her open. I mean, that's just logic for you. She talks him through how to actually treat her using the med kit, and he is naturally amazed considering he lives in a time where the only useful medicine is try not to pick at that. He sees Torres and the others as Eternals, presumably stand-ins for the Greek gods given his expectations. This storytelling element certainly points towards the Greek plays. He plays the recording of their logs in the various records that inspired his last play.
I pieced them together. Tried to fill in the gaps.
You made a play out of our logs?
The away mission of Ilana Torres.
You were nearly killed. It was great. Why don't we see if I can write another play by having you catch a bullet in your teeth? Well, now he needs that new play, and he wants her help, so she says, cut her free first. But while she is very concerned about the Starfleet Prime Directive about not interfering, she's not too concerned with Starfleet's reputation as a bunch of big fat liars, because she vaporizes a tree and tells him to piss off and never come back. So, with him gone, she's now free to fix the Delta Flyer, because as we've established, fix something, pissed off, or screw somebody are her 3 character plots. Of course, I don't claim to be a Starfleet engineer, but I'd have to say the diagnosis on this thing is, fucked. At the moment, you couldn't even stop it from raining in here, never mind get it to do anything. To brighten her day, Kellis swings by. But this time he's going to try to use a bit more gentle persuasion on her than a knife. He offers to trade her food for information about Earth. So she explains in naval terms how the events of the plot stranded them out here, where she's now getting bled by a poet who's into rope play. When he touches on her relationship with Tom, though, she ends the discussion and demands a lot more than food for next time. She wants dilithium. And there happens to be some nearby on the land of Kellis's patron. Of course, this is the days when the penalty for being a peasant in the wrong place just because they're starving to death is punishable by death, so he's not too keen to do that. But he really needs this story. So he comes back later that night with a slab of the stuff. You must really be desperate to risk a slow death just to get an idea for a story. Take a workshop, Kellis. That's got to be a better choice. While they're working on the story, back on Voyager, Paris is losing it because they have no rescue plan for the missing pair. But back on the planet, the fake Paris is working on his love scene with the fake Seven of Nine. But they're having trouble because these people are all impossible for them to understand. And Kellis doesn't exactly blame them. Hell, I've had decades and I still find their actions hard to believe sometimes. Torres is more interested in not being stranded here, though, and her latest attempt to get the subspace transmitter working fails spectacularly. So she needs a metal plate with tin, bronze, and gold, which is crazy expensive here, too. And if he gets that for her, she agrees she'll explain Vulcans to him. I should mention by now that the episode is set up to contrast the actual people with the fictionalized account. We discuss Paris, so we cut to the real Paris going bananas. We discuss Vulcans, so we see Tuvok working without sleep trying to find the missing pair, and so on. However, these points don't serve much use. The scenes feel far more like filler, regardless of the intent. The actor playing Tuvok, I'm sorry, I don't mean Tim Russ, I mean the actor playing the fake Tuvok. But not the actor who's playing the actor who's playing the fake Tuvok. I just mean that the actor who's playing fake Tuvok in character, but not the actor who's playing that actor who's... Sorry, this is some Inception level bullshit, isn't it? This dude is struggling with things, see. He's tearing up because he doesn't want the audience to think that he's a terrible performer. And goodness knows we've seen a number of bad Vulcan performances over the years, so his situation is understandable. He finds this idea of Tuvok having no emotions unbelievable, so he adds the tears in to try to prove to everybody that he's acting. Well, there's a lot more reasons for tears now, because the patron has just been insulted and is already plotting to go to war with one of their neighbors over that. And that gives Kellis a kick in the butt to really make his play work.
I need a way to change his mind.
I don't have that kind of magical power.
Yes, you do. I believe the right kind of play can turn the mind from violent thoughts. The perfect play might even stop a war.
Yeah, that's great, but you also believe that cutting someone's wrists is good medicine. I need more than the belief system of an idiot in order to be swayed.
I can't fix the transmitter with this. There's too many impurities. It'll never carry a plasma charge.
Throw it on the scrap pile. But it's made of gold. I mortgaged my house for this. And I said to throw it on the scrap pile. Torres feels doomed, but don't worry. Kellis says it's getting worse. If there is a war, scouting parties will come into these mountains. The Delta Flyer will be discovered, and Torres is going to find herself in the middle of a war zone where both sides believe that she has magical powers. So either side would want to have her. The only hope, he says, is making a play that will convince the patron not to go to war. So she finally agrees to come to the theater, or whatever it is, and help with the story. The problem is finding a way to spin this out into a good one. Simply having Torres be rescued, or even not rescued, doesn't mean all that much here. I mean, as far as the play goes, I'm sure that she has a rather strong opinion on that ending. Manoski's allegory is most revealed here as they discuss the details about the story. An old-timer says that the truth of the story is what will capture people, while Kellis insists that things like mistaken identity, sudden revelations, and shocking reversals are the tricks that make a story work. Kellis represents someone who wants to manufacture engagement through manipulation, plot contrivances, shallow romance, and action. While the old guy represents those that get to the dramatic heart of the work, the character, the struggles, the moral questions, the complexity that demands wit and judgment as much as arms and trickery. Well, Kellis intends to prove that his way is better.
Chakotay, Why must I be denied what every other female officer on the ship can have?
Captain?
The privilege of your touch.
I know there's one group of fans giving this a standing ovation. The real meeting isn't quite so carnal.
If that was good news, you'd be smiling.
Wow, Captain, your deductive skills are shocking. How's this for a deduction? If you didn't want to get kicked in the junk, you'd have kept your stupid trap Ow! Wearing a cup, Chakotay? 6 years as my first officer, but you're finally learning. Now turn around, because I'm putting my boot up your ass. Back on the planet, Torres gives her assessment. This is crap. Stuck in ancient Greece and need to make some kind of play while we're in Greece that has a romantic tone to it while we're in Greece. No, that won't work. It's spelled the wrong way. Torres basically finds the whole thing pointless. The idea that a few words and some kissing can make the patron just forget about going to war is absurd. It won't work. But it's while minding the ideas of the Borg that Kellis gets what he needs. He needs to show the kind of leader that Janeway is. In theory, anyway. She's someone who would face an enemy that wants to destroy them from without and within, but when the moment comes to destroy the Queen, would instead stay her hand rather than fighting on, only to perpetuate war without end. But there's another problem. Kellis's girlfriend went looking for where Torres and Kellis had been shacking up. She was certain that those two were boning and bumping their forehead lumps. But she found the Delta Flyer instead. Clearly, these two aren't having a romance. So she warns Torres not to get anywhere near her man, because what this situation really needs right now is jealousy to the point of irrationality. And speaking of bad decision-making, Harry turns up. His pod landed on this world, and he found his way here. Now you might be thinking that, great, now Torres is stuck with Harry. Not much of an improvement. But he's brought the homing signal for the escape pod along, which can be used, with enough power, to alert Voyager to where they are and get a rescue. They could even salvage the Delta Flyer too. It's a great investment, that ship. They were crashing them so often that building a great big one meant that you were stranded with a lot more parts to rebuild it when it inevitably went into the ground. Speaking of flaming wreckage, the play. Everything is good except for the ending, which everyone agrees is shit. And as is noted, a bad ending can destroy you. For anyone who's not too certain about that, the words Mass Effect 3 should be all the convincing that people need. Let's see what the audience thinks of this play. Not looking good, Kellis. You really shouldn't have adapted Initiations. Actually, the play isn't that bad. It reveals that Seven was the Borg Queen all along, plotting to assimilate Voyager from within. But Janeway saw through it and is plotting a way to thwart it and to save the ship. So a lot of compelling intrigue. Nothing at all like Initiations. But it still needs an ending, so Kellis sends a messenger to Torres, who is awaiting rescue. And she decides that she wants to help him, much to Harry's confusion.
Harry, have you ever inspired anybody?
Of course not. What a ridiculous question. She beams over to the end of the play, where the girlfriend freaks and tries to expose Torres, but one of the members of the chorus covers and convinces the patron that this is all part of the act. And for the grand finale, Torres is beamed away to Voyager, with promises of further plays, assuming that CBS doesn't send a takedown notice, of course. The post-episode follow-up. While Neelix appears in this episode, he doesn't appear in the play. Thus, I'm going to call this one a wash, since the play was much better than the episode anyway. We have a burn baby burn for the Delta Flyer crashing once again. Final score for Muse is 7 out of 10. Its audacity works despite some of the problems, chiefly and ironically being Voyager itself, which is incredibly dull every time it crops up in this episode. The only two positives were Tuvok snoring, and that when we cut for the magic meeting room scene, we did so at the end of their briefing, when all the laying out of the stuff is already over. But the episode on the planet is far more interesting, and it would have been much more enjoyable to continue exploring the concepts there rather than returning to the same old, same old. But then, this is about the play, and Torres ascending into the heavens was for Manaski to take his final bow and end on his terms, to do something novel. Indeed, the episode brings to mind the very idea of what would make a good television show. Does it need to shake things up from episode to episode to avoid being too much of any one thing? Or does that breed inconsistency or undermine things? Does keeping a focus on things like an ongoing storyline remove the chance for it to take chances sometimes? Which, is vital in many cases to avoid being stale or to make the creative forces tired of the work. Do ongoing plot lines that lack episodic feel make better shows? Or does it result in a case where everyone likes but nobody loves? If there's any legacy that Joe Menosky should have, it's that oftentimes he told stories that made the audience ask those kinds of questions. And even if he fell on his face from time to time, at least he, most of the time, gave people something to think about. And that's something that Star Trek really needs to do more often.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
I'm afraid.